All right. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Chad and Mel Movie Hour. If you loved Desperately Seeking Susan, you're going to love our deep dive into Snowpiercer. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, thank you / we apologize in advance. Yeah, so I am super excited because aside from The Fountain, which is already in our playlist, this is one of my top 20, maybe top 10 movies of all time. So this is super exciting for me, and I persuaded Chad to watch it, and lucky for me, he loved it enough to do this with me. So now I have an excuse to talk about it for an hour or two. So with that being said, grab your cocktails. I'm doing a Sutter Home Pinot Grigio. And what are you doing? You're doing a gin moment, right?
Hendrix.
Yeah. So cheers, guys. Here we go. All right.
Cheers.
Okay. So I first discovered this movie in 2013 when it came out in theaters by just reading about it online, honestly, before it came out. And there was some to-do about it. No one at that point that didn't already know who Bong Joon was knew who the hell Bong Joon was. And so this is my first introduction to his work. There's a little bit of to-do about it because you had Chris Evans coming off of Captain America, the first one in 2012, in between the second Captain America Civil War. So he's like already in the stratosphere, and he's doing this like random independent movie. You've got Tilda Swinton, you've got Ed Harris, you've got John Hurt, Octavia Spencer. You've got like this crazy cast in this small indie Korean directed movie based on a French graphic novel. Hello, I saw it. I loved it. Like I said, it made it into my top 20, maybe top 15 movies of all time. And yeah.
Octavia Spencer.
Yeah, she's epic in it. The gentleman from Trainspotting is also in it. We'll get into cast and crew. There's so many people to talk about. Jamie Bell. But yeah, I'm super stoked because this movie just feeds my soul. I've seen it probably a dozen times, if not more. So yeah, I just want to turn it over to Chad really quickly and get your first impressions because you just watched it.
Right. I watched it twice because I felt like it was layered enough that I had to see it again immediately and try to get different, a deeper appreciation for it and understanding. I loved it. I thought it was great. Of course, I've seen Parasite, and I kind of wish I had seen this before Parasite, like maybe when it came out as a lead up to, because it makes so much sense, because a lot of the same class system and everything he's exploring here, he does in Parasite. Of course, I love Parasite, and we'll get into that when we do Parasite. The only film I had seen of him back in years ago or whatever was The Host, which didn't like grab me right away. It's probably one I need to go back and rewatch again. The CG was all a little like much for me, but definitely it's a good movie. So in the course of our series on him, we're gonna do which films?
Parasite.
Snowpiercer, this one, Parasite, and then Train to Busan.
Well, I don't know how involved he was in Train to Busan. I think he was more involved, obviously, as screenwriter and director in The Host, and he did another movie called Mother. But we can do
Mother. I was interested in seeing too.
But I have not seen The Host, so you're ahead of me on that, and that came out in 2006.
Right.
So that was fairly early on in his career. But what's so impressive about him is for everything we've mentioned up to this point, he's not only directed, but he's been the lead screenwriter on too, which is epic.
Right. So for Host, he was writer and director. The same for Mother and Snowpiercer, and Parasite. I've seen Akcha, which is that like pro-vegan, and he is vegan and I am vegan, so that like attracted me, and that was before. But I never pieced together that he had done some of these films as a body of work, or much about him, until Parasite.
Yes.
So yeah. I was looking for more information about the other film. But yeah, so my impression was that it was really great. There was like an itch that I was trying to scratch that I was like, this kind of reminds me of something that's comforting from my childhood that we will really get into. Not yet, teaser. But there was something like wondrous about it, and I was just like, this is like an experience I've had before. Not in a bad way, in a really good way. And I was like, I didn't think much of it until you shared with me a theory that we'll talk more about later. But
Yeah.
I just loved it. Like I said, I couldn't wait to watch it again because there's so much to it. I don't know. We can get more in depth with it, but I'll toss it back to you for now.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled that you loved it and that you even took the time to rewatch it in like a 48-hour span of time. That's dedication and it's much appreciated. I literally try and force everybody I know to watch this movie and it doesn't work. But I can't. I can only express how I feel about this movie by seconding what you just said, insofar as that it scratches an itch. There's like this whimsy to it, this fantastical like element to it that like no
You
film
don't get that in films anymore.
And like it's so subtle that it's like I think that's the magic of Bong Joon Ho is, and also the story, and we'll get into the origin story, but I think that's like the secret sauce is that he's tapping into storytelling elements that other directors aren't right now, and he's saying something political and he's saying something important, but it's under the guise of something that's so fantastical and whimsical and surrealistic that it just puts you, for me anyways, it's transcendent. Like when I watch that movie, I am fully on that train and like living in the moment, just waiting to go from car to car to car. So yeah, let's talk about the cast. The movie came out in 2013. Again, you have Chris Evans, right? You have Daddy, fresh off of Captain America. Everyone is thirsty for Daddy, myself included. Here he comes and he does this crazy independent movie. You have Octavia Spencer. Octavia Spencer plays a mother named Tanya.
Who I love more and more, the more that I see her lesser known roles.
Yeah,
like,
her body work is epic. Yeah. And this is the first time she worked with Chris Evans. She worked with him a little bit later on, maybe in 2018. It came out, a movie called Gifted, where she plays Chris Evans' neighbor when he has like a genius little sister. Highly recommend that movie. It's super great. But yeah, you have Octavia Spencer. I mean, what else, what do you want me to say? You have Jamie Bell, who to me is highly underrated, highly underutilized as an actor. He had his breakout role as Billy Elliot like over a decade ago. He's done amazing acting. He's great in this. He plays Edgar, Chris Evans's character, Curtis's best friend. You have John Hurt. Okay, like I'm not even gonna. If you don't know,
so I'll take over for this moment.
I'm gonna say ask somebody, but Chad is here to help you.
So obviously we just finished our big long run of Alien films. We did all the Alien films. John Hurt is the original OG person that the first Alien came out of on screen in the 1979 masterpiece Alien. If you didn't know, among many other things, he's a very great, awesome, well-rounded actor. And he's great in this.
I mean, he's fucking Caligula. What do you want from me? So not only did they give John Hurt in this movie, but they gave us Ewan Bremner, the Scottish actor who you know and love from Trainspotting, the gentleman that shat the bed. He's in Snowpiercer. He plays one of the tail sectioners who is also a father, and his child gets taken, and that becomes a big plot point. We'll get into all of it. You have Kang Ho Song, and I hope I'm not butchering his name, the Korean gentleman that plays Nam in Snowpiercer, and also the father in Parasite. So if you've seen Parasite, the same gentleman plays a very different character in Snowpiercer, and an incredible actor, and just, oh my goodness.
The bit role that I'm obsessed with is Thomas Lemarquis. Lemarquis. So, French Icelandic actor who was in Blade Runner 2049, a small role. He's just like one of those actors that like adds so much to a small role, and he's so memorable. Like he could have just a few minutes on screen, but it's like a takeaway that you're always gonna have from that film. And he plays a gentleman called Egghead in the film, one of Wilford's agents.
And he's very, not only is he visually arresting when you see him on screen, but he's also like, he's a little bit of a scene stealer, just like he was in Blade Runner. Like he just, you take your eyes off of him. Yeah, he's delicious in this. You have Ko Asung, who plays Yona, which is Nam's daughter in this movie. She's a delicious and fantastic Korean actress. You have, of course, Tilda Swinton, who plays Minister Mason. We're gonna have to get into that. This is Tilda Swinton at her like peak. Like if you want the most fucking, like if you said give me the craziest Tilda Swinton you can give me, Snowpiercer gives it to you.
Like a Nick Cage Tilda.
Oh, like full, like off the rails Nick Cage. False teeth, just a delicious performance. I mean, if you like anything she's done, this. And then finally we have Ed Harris, Daddy, who plays Wilford. And Wilford, we will get into exactly who that is in just a second when we delve into plot. But I mean, what can we say about Ed Harris that hasn't already been said? Is there anything?
Not that I can think of. His reputation precedes him.
I think so. I mean, you go from The Abyss to The Hours to this to Westworld. I mean, Daddy gives it all to you, and he gives it to you right and good. Oh, one more person, Allison Hill. Delicious in this role. She plays teacher, and she's also
she's so good.
Devs. She's also in Devs, which if you guys aren't watching Devs on Hulu, it's a television show by Alex Garland. We were discussing this off camera. Fix your life and watch Devs. She's also in the
She's the teacher in this?
She's the teacher.
When she's like playing the piano and like her eyes roll back in her head because she's like so invested. It's amazing.
Orgasm over the propaganda.
Exactly. I loved it.
A moment right now because she's in Devs and she's also on Picard, and she's fantastic in both. But yeah, so that's cast. Should we dive into?
I wanted to go off on a side tangent about the marketing for this, but you just tell me when to interject that where it makes sense.
Let's do that now because.
Okay, because that's the first thing you see, and it's the first thing I saw. So you and another friend of mine was also on me to watch this for quite a while, the past like year actually, because it's been on streaming actually, and right now it's on Netflix, right?
It was on Prime. I mean, it still is, but now it's on Netflix.
Okay, so Netflix if you want to see it, but I would kind of like, it's really because of how great I feel about Parasite that I was like, I need to see Snowpiercer. And then when you tell me I have to watch it. So I'm really glad I did because my first impression was the poster for this film, which I feel is misleading. It's like it looks more like a terrorism plot, like secret agent, like I don't even know what, but it basically has Chris Evans like front and center, and like the cold snow imagery, and then like the other cast heads. But I feel that marketing for films is something that's gone like way down in quality over the past couple decades. I feel so strongly about that. But a film like this is like a special film, and I feel like they should have fought for it to have some like really special actual art as the artwork, because what they have is like a Photoshop creation that anyone could have done. It's not like art. It's not well thought out. It doesn't convey the arc of the film or the messages of the film in any way, really. It just almost looks like an action film or just like whatever dumb thing. And I was like, that's the only thing that held me back from watching this as long as it took me. Is like, I'm like, I don't know really what this is. I didn't know what it was about fully either, to be honest. But I just think that eventually some company like Arrow or Shout Factory is going to come out with like a really cool special edition Blu-ray with their own artwork for it, as they usually do. And then we'll get like some proper artwork for this film, because a film that has this much art in it needs good art to represent it.
Z formations everywhere. Cheers. Okay. So
that's all I have.
Just to talk about the sermon that we just heard. So agreed. And they're clearly capitalizing on Chris Evans' moment coming off of being happy, right? So like the main poster is Chris Evans and like a beanie and like, you know, furrowed brow and like intensity, and you have no idea what this movie's about.
They have to sell it. Yeah, they have to market it.
Even like the expanded poster is just like other people in the cast, like on the either side of him, and it's like, what is this movie about? So unless you took time to like figure out what the movie was about and decide to go to the theater and see it, you probably didn't see it.
It looks like your typical film. It doesn't have any of that whimsy that, like you were saying, the film has so much whimsy in it, and you just don't get that enough.
And the movie it wasn't even heavily marketed at all, really. It was a small release at the time, and now that Parasite has hit the stratosphere, I think people are going back and watching Bong Joon-ho's catalog and discovering all of these gems, which just makes me very happy. But I want to take just one quick step back and mention that this film is actually, it's not an original screenplay, it's an adaptation of a French graphic novel called, and I will butcher this, no matter how many times I listen to it on Google Translate, Les Transperceneige, which translates...
That sounded good to me.
Thank you. Les Transperceneige translates to Snowpiercer. There you go.
Snowpiercer.
The Snowpiercer. So the first volume of this graphic novel came out in 1982, year I was born. It's now on my to-do list of things to read. I mean, it has been for a while, but who has the time? It's a post-apocalyptic French graphic novel created by Jacques Loeb, Jean-Marc Rochette, and there's another gentleman, Ben Legrand, who wrote this graphic novel, and it eventually became 4 volumes. I don't know to what extent Snowpiercer, as we know it, the Western version, if it's just volume 1 or if it's like the whole thing, I don't know. If you know, put it in the comments, take us to church. But yeah, so this is an adapted screenplay, and well done, if I might say. The premise is just very short and sweet. If you need to be sold to go watch it, it's July 1st, 2014. Global warming is happening. It's real as it is in real life. Spoiler alert. And we discover something, a chemical agent called CW7, which we launch into the upper atmosphere in an attempt to cool the temperature of the planet, and it backfires and basically... Oopsie. Yeah, spoiler alert, oopsie, we fucked up. It ends up bringing on a brand new ice age. So that's what you kind of get in the opening credits. You got credits and you got a little bit of data coming in. And then basically the movie begins 17 years later in 2031. So this is what we have to look forward to, where a gentleman named Wilford, played by Ed Harris, has built a perpetual motion engine train that travels across the globe, and it's basically Noah's Ark. So anybody and everybody that survived this apocalyptic event now exists on this train. Every last remaining human lives on this train. That's it. And so you have this closed ecosystem, and it's a genius format for storytelling.
Loved it.
Yeah, so that's my just kind of plot overview.
You know, what I was just thinking is we're always complaining that we don't get original scripts anymore. I mean, even though it came from a graphic novel, this is an incredibly awesome, great, and original concept and script that's well executed. And it came out, in the last 10 years or whatever.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, the dialogue is brilliant. One of the things, and I don't know if this caught your eye because you are very much not just a cinephile, but you're very much, you have an eye for the technical and an appreciation for the technical. One of the things that struck me, or when I first saw it and continues to strike me with every viewing, is the way, because this entire film is filmed on a train, if you will, or set on a train, is the way that the set was designed to sway. So when the camera is facing any given shot, you can see the cars move.
Right. You always have that movement. Yeah.
Yeah, it's delicious.
It's a great way to contain like a story and a cast, because I feel like that's always a great device when you can contain your story physically. They did it in Alien by having them in space, not being able to leave the spaceship. So whenever there's a new, like, innovative way that you can contain something and get a little bit of claustrophobia and you're in there with them, I just think it's kind of special. And this is like one of those really cool concepts.
Yeah, and I think, if you could indulge me with a musical analogy, you have artists that are like doing everything, and then you compare them to somebody like a Jack White, who maybe not so much now, but like when the White Stripes first came out, like he was all about paring down, right? Like stripping down the most minimal amount of instruments, the most minimal amount of everything, and seeing what you could do with that. And I think, aside from creating a claustrophobic environment in the storytelling aspect, the actual physical limitations that are placed on actors with something like this train as like a set, like, look at how transcendent this movie is. I mean, and it's set on a train. The entire movie is set on a train. And look, I mean, I don't know how else to articulate it. I just get so excited about it. But yeah, I mean, the dialogue in this movie, we're 17 years post this apocalyptic event, this new ice age. There are people that remember the time before, and there are people that are train babies that have been born in this ecosystem that have
17 years. Yep. If you were there, if you're 17 or younger, you had to be born on the train.
It's just amazing. And one of the kids referred to it as the whole wide train instead of the whole wide world.
Yeah, that's great.
It's just, it's amazing. So I won't go into every detail of the plot, although I could. Basically, the idea is, much like what Bong Joon explores in Parasite, is classism. And you have the train divided into a caste system, where the front section is where the 1%ers are, and then you move backwards until you get to the tail section, which is pretty much where we, the 99%, live. And you have literally no windows in this section of the train. There's no access to light. The only food source they have are these gelatinous protein bars, which we come to find out are made from the cockroaches and bugs that exist in the train.
Like, it's like McDonald's, like the pink sludge that they use for like chicken nuggets.
It's essentially the same.
Which lower income people eat a lot. Fast food.
I mean, the chicken nuggets, they're good. I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
I'm just saying, like, that when a lot of like lower income people in our society eat
Yeah.
or had, I think it's changing now, but have eaten, not as well or not as healthy as the one percenters. So you have that same, there's a lot that like applies directly over to our current society. Even the
Absolutely.
way that they send someone down to talk to people from the front
Right.
of the train.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great point. Like the access to just not even like fancy health food, but just like whole food.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Just mean like foods that aren't processed.
Right.
Is limited by price, and if
Right.
you are
But you
trying
can
to,
get a 99-cent cheeseburger that's totally crap on every street corner in America.
so we wonder why the poor are kept obese or kept unhealthy, or
Exactly.
it's easier to feed your family 4 Happy Meals than it is cheaper too, obviously,
Sure.
than to go to your local grocery store and buy
And
something
it's
that's
comforting
it's
when people are stressed.
it's easy, it's comforting, it's designed that way for a reason, and that is very well articulated with Snowpiercer. You have Minister Mason, played by Tilda Swinton, who is essentially the representative of Wilford, who is the engineer who created this train. Apparently, he was a wealthy, you know, what's the term I'm looking for?
He was like one of our chosen ones, like an Elon Musk. Like he was one of the, I kept thinking that when I was watching it, like this was one of those really influential people, but maybe out there, a little more out there mentally, but definitely
So then Elon.
someone like an Elon Musk, maybe not quite, but like in that realm of like
Right.
someone that was just very influential and very kind of a little bit ahead of things in certain areas.
Yeah, like somebody that was a titan of industry, but also like a genius in terms of
Right.
engineering. So he was the architect of this train, this arc. And Tilda Swinton's Minister Mason is just again the most delicious character, and she's his spokesperson. So she comes or descends from the front section of the train to the tail section to relay messages, to dole out punishment. And one of the other things you see in this movie is this random woman who's not given a name. We don't know anything about her, that randomly comes and says they're doing medical inspections of the children, and then will measure the children arm from length of their arms, arm to arm, and then steals them and brings them we don't know where.
Did you think for a moment that they were going to have her like be revealed to be a synthetic?
Tilda Swinton, or the woman that comes in yellow to snatch
the woman
kid?
in yellow. She very much acts like an android.
You're absolutely right. You're blowing my mind right now. No, that never occurred to me. But that's
I
like
kept waiting for the other shoe to drop on that. So maybe she is like a synthetic, or maybe not. But it was always in my mind for some reason.
Oh my God.
I mean, she's all of her humanity is totally stripped away from her, for sure.
Yeah, you've given me a reason to watch this movie for the nth time. Thank you so much.
I mean, if he is a genius of technology and then this is in the future, then why not? I mean,
why not? Yeah, she could be an artificial person, as it were. Yeah, no.
Maybe we aren't that advanced yet in this universe. I don't know.
2031, so we're not far off. But speaking of waiting for the other shoe to drop, that leads me to the shoe quote. And when Minister Mason comes to the tail section, because essentially the first act of this movie is the tail sectioners living in abject poverty,
right.
A revolt to storm and take the front of the train, take back the train, as it were. And so you have Minister Mason coming down, and after the kids have been kidnapped, 2 of them, Octavia Spencer's kid and the gentleman from Trainspotting, their kids get taken.
Yeah. Her kid is so adorable too. And the photo of him in it is like extra adorable.
Yeah, and that's another great character. I don't know the character's name, but there's
right. He's the guy that he's like the documentarian.
Yeah.
And so instead of taking photography, he sketches everything, the history of the tail section of the train, and he's like a historian basically.
And his character is called Painter, and he's played by Clark Middleton. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, everything is just, I can't. But Tilda comes
so
down.
Good.
I'm not even like, I have 2 more pages of notes. It's gonna be 3 hours. Okay, stay with me. So Tilda comes down, and this goes back to dialogue. Okay, stay with me, folks. This is when she gives like this speech that goes back to classism and the theme of this film and the theme of Parasite, and she's basically trying to dissuade the tail sectioners from acting out and getting out of place. And there's this repeating mantra from the 1%ers or the front sectioners, which is "so it is." So anytime she says something, anytime it's followed by "so it is." Like, this is Bible.
Right.
She's to essentially try and leave your class. Quote, a sacred line is being crossed, end quote. She says, know your place. And she takes a shoe and she puts it on somebody's head and she says, you're a shoe, be a shoe. So
degrading.
It's so degrading.
It's so demeaning and so degrading, and it's so relevant right now in our society with the way that, things are going with our politicians, and it's scary. Yeah.
And it's fucking relevant because history is repeating itself, but it's also a repetition of like Nazi Germany and any type of any propaganda where people are being told, like,
it's like the ultimate propaganda monologue that she delivers, and it's so good. In terms of writing.
So good. So yeah, basically, long story short, like, they end up being able to storm out of the tail section, and they recruit Kang Ho Song's character, the gentleman that's also in Parasite, who plays Nam in this movie, who's essentially in the prison section of the train, which is not a prison with bars, but people are literally in the caskets that you see in
more drawers.
Yes, yeah. So that's where they keep the criminals.
You would think like they're gonna totally go insane in that thing, and then how are they fed? And I kept thinking, like, how do people like go to the bathroom? But I guess it's like an airplane. But
also, I think those questions are what makes this movie great, is because, like, the practicality, you have to suspend your so much with this movie,
but it's also realistic though. Like, even if you have a question, you can kind of figure it out. And
they don't make it hard for you to suspend your disbelief in the movie. They make it really easy because the writing and acting is so good. But essentially, the way that they were able to storm is they figured out that the guns that the guards were holding had no bullets. Like, they took a chance and a leap of faith and realized that for years and years and years, bullets have been extinct. And that's how they refer to things that no longer exist in this ecosystem, including non-living, non-sentient objects as extinct. So they know that cigarettes are extinct, and they know that bullets are extinct. So they recruit this gentleman out of the jail section, because apparently he helped engineer the train and he knows how to, like, bypass doors and whatnot. And he will only do it if they give him something called chronal, which
he did the security portion specifically, right?
Yes. Yeah. So they're soliciting his skills by giving him chronal, which is essentially industrial waste byproduct of the train, and it gets people high. The 1%ers at the front of the train use it. It's a hallucinogen, and it's also highly flammable, which will come in very relevant later. I don't know what else. We talked about the 17 years. So you have somebody like Curtis, who's played by Chris Evans, the main character, who talks about his experience on the train. He lived 17 years on Earth and 17 years on the train. So you have him and John Hurt, who is basically like the, I don't know, the Bernie Sanders, if you will, of the tail section. Like he is.
That's perfect.
He's a triple amputee, so he literally has like no legs and one arm, and we will find out why. But he is kind of
the ultimate like altruistic.
Yeah, he's the one that is like the elder that protects the tail sectioners, is the holder of their history on the train, and Curtis is like his protege. So the acting and the dialogue and the relationship between Chris Evans and John Hurt in this film, I think, is absolutely just delicious.
And they're all holding John Hurt's character up to lead them and be the leader that they think he should be.
Yes, and we
based
know
on his beliefs and all of their reaction to how the front tail treats the back tail of the train. Yeah.
And
just like in real life.
I mean, honestly, like you literally, I would say you couldn't make it up, but you can, and you also can't. But I think I'm a huge Chris Evans fan, not just because I'm thirsty for Chris Evans, but I think that he's got a really legit resume outside of the Marvel universe that a lot of people don't realize. Snowpiercer obviously being one of them. But even before he was in Captain America, not going as far back as like Not Another Teen Movie, but like he was in a movie called Puncture, which I highly recommend. I think he's a great actor, and he really gets to shine in this.
Yeah, he's definitely great in this. I had and have no respect for him outside of this yet, but I'll have to check out some of his other movies. I just don't love Marvel movies, but that's
that's totally fair.
That's my fight.
Yeah, I would say check out Puncture and check out Gifted. Cool. Puncture came out before he was in Marvel. Gifted came out after Snowpiercer, whilst he was still in the Marvel universe. And there's a lot of other stuff, but I think he really shines in this, and the conversations and the relationship between him and this elder, I just think are fantastic. But eventually, you know, they're storming the various cars of the train, and I want to get your thoughts on this particular part, which is when they get to the point where they're about to get to the water section of the train. And we know that once you take the section of the train that manages the water, you've got all the power. So We're like at that threshold in this hero's journey. The doors to that car are opened by Nam's character. And then you see all of these like guards or whatever in like hoods and like leather gimp masks.
That was bizarre when I first saw it.
Like all sorts of like knives and shit, and it's not in full slow-mo, but it's like slowed down slightly so you get like that effect. That's one of the most visually arresting shots.
And the additional layer of it going right through New Year's, like it's New Year's when all this is happening, and when they get to that part in the train, that's the transition where the train passes a certain vantage point where they know when they pass that it's the next year, because it takes the train a year to go around the earth. So every time they pass the same place, it's Happy New Year, right? So 12 midnight, but not midnight, but you get the idea. So it's so bizarre and crazy when they all are like, they stop fighting and they're just like, Happy New Year. Yeah. But it's cool, and it's so like interesting, and it's just something that no other film would do. Like they wouldn't dare to have like a quirky moment in the middle of this like heady fight scene that's supposed to be like all action and violence.
And there's even two quirky moments in that, because you have like this badass, sexy fucking just deliciously gory and violent slow-mo like fight scene, and like these epic shots of like Chris Evans like slow-mo with like a knife, and he's just delish, and like everything's delish. You have Jamie Bell, delish. Everybody's just And then you have Minister.
Who were these people though? Like, I was so confused when the door opened, because we also have a clairvoyant with us, right? The other Asian actress, and I wanted to do a whole sidebar about his
daughter.
Like, as Bong Joon Ho progresses into more and more of American acceptance from American audience and American relevance, how he continues to cast the same way, which is really cool. And it's just like so gratifying to finally see films with like so many like Asian characters and different types of characters. But that's like a whole nother sidebar. But I just think it's cool because she's her character, what's her character's name?
Fiona, she's Nam's daughter.
Right. She's clairvoyant. So she gets the sense like, there's some crazy shit behind this door. She's like, don't open it. And he presses it right when she says, don't open it. It opens, and it's these guys with these hoods on, which is the scene we're talking about. And they're all like hooded up and like, it's almost like S&M gear in a way, but like not. But total like, we're here to slay you gear. So who are they, like an army on the ship, or not the ship, the train?
I think they're essentially the militia, the hired guns in the event of an uprising.
Right.
You know,
that makes a lot of sense. But at first I was like, what is happening? Which is a great feeling to have when watching a movie, because you just never get that anymore.
Nothing is your hand is not held in this movie, and nothing is explicitly ever explained. It's just like you go from car to car.
And I love that, because there's that like every train car that you then progress to is like another gift of like, it's like another surprise, like what's this gonna be? And then it gets very creative, where it's like an orange grove and like a sushi bar with like a full aquarium and a classroom. I don't want to get too ahead of us, but them doing that is so gratifying as a viewer, because you're just taking it all in and just eating it up, and it's like goodies, right? And I feel like we never get those kind of fun surprises in film anymore either. Gotta get off my high horse. But you know what? This is an exceptional film.
You're on the right horse, and the fact that like there is no way to anticipate as a first-time viewer of this film what's coming next. Every time a new door is opened by Nam and his daughter, there is no way to anticipate. Like, and
there's also no way to show, because the train is so, you get a sense in the film that the train is so massive that they didn't even have time in the film to show you their whole journey. So you're obviously like skipping ahead through different parts. So your mind almost like imagines like, well, what else is there in the train? Because the train is the whole world for them. So you have obviously like everything, but
at one point in the movie, you get to an idea or a sense of how big the train is around a horseshoe.
Yes.
And fight scene where somebody on this side can actually shoot across to somebody else on the other side.
And that's just a great scene, execution-wise and staging-wise for any action film.
Oh my god!
Like, that's just a really great plot device, the way they did that.
Yeah, your point about like we're definitely not seeing every part of the train. I didn't even think about that, because they show us
there's certain edits where now they're in a new room, but they could have already gone through a few rooms the way it's edited, and I love that.
Yeah, it's
not like you see them all walk through the door each time.
Right.
Sometimes you're just in the next one.
Yeah, and in one of the in a scene that is one of my favorites, which is this battle scene with the tail sectioners and these gentlemen and possibly gentlewomen in these masks who are like the guards trying to keep them from getting to the water section. It goes from bad to worse because once midnight, the stroke of midnight hits, And we know this because they go through what's called Ekaterina Bridge. That's how they know they've made it around the world, and it's been a year. They go through a tunnel. The bridge is a tunnel, and everything goes pitch black. And one thing we should mention is that, like, right before they get to this car with the goons, they actually get to a car with windows for the first time, and you see everybody kind of like shield their eyes because they haven't seen light. Some of
That's
them
so cool, yeah.
But the scene goes from like they're fighting in broad daylight with these windows, and then they go through the tunnel, and then the goons have night vision goggles, so you get to see the scene through night vision from their perspective, but you know that the tail sectioners are fighting literally blind, and it's just a beautifully shot, executed scene technically, but also like the emotions are just like heightened because how could they possibly win this battle? Like, how?
Right.
I can't. But they do, and then they get to, the aquarium, which is like, if you've ever been in the world or anything, and you go through like the conveyor belt, like the people mover, and there's like water above you. There's a car like that. I mean, who even thinks of this shit?
I know,
and then
it's great.
The groves, the garden, and then they get to like the butcher area, and then they finally get to the classroom, which is where we have a teacher played by Allison Pill.
I was wondering when I was watching all that, does everyone have to walk through every single one of these places to get anywhere they need to go? So, and then is there foot traffic all day through these places? Like, for example, one of them is like a peaceful spa where people are really trying to zen out. Did they just have foot traffic all day, or is it like timed?
This is an excellent logistical question. I think this is where we just have to suspend our disbelief. But I think if we were on said Snowpiercer, yes, it'd be foot traffic all day long.
Maybe it's like a double decker, and we just don't know there's an upper level.
It could be a double decker. I don't know, but that's an excellent logistical question. I think.
And then they get to the classroom.
Oh my God, Allison Pill. It's just delicious in this movie. So
incredible. This is one of my favorite moments in the film. This one really like pulled me in. This was a masterful scene. With the propaganda.
The propaganda, but it's worth mentioning at this juncture, they've made it past the goons and they've kidnapped Tilda Swinton's Minister Mason, who's basically said, I want to live. I'll take you to the front of the train. Kill Wilford. Just let me live. Like, she totally sold out so quickly. So she's basically escorting them at this point. They don't have to fight their way through. They're in the upper classes of the train, or the working parts of the train at this juncture. And they get to just abruptly, to your point, like it just cuts to all of a sudden they're in a classroom. And you have all of these like elementary school age kids, and Octavia Spencer and the other gentlemen are trying to find their two missing kids, and they're not there. And Allison Pill is teacher, and she's just psychotically wholesome. And then she plays a like.
She's like the epitome of drank the Kool-Aid.
She's drunk on it too.
I mean, she's getting high off the Kool-Aid. She's just like loves it.
You mentioned like off camera, like she does like the sing along. Of like, what happens if we leave the train? We all freeze and die, and all the kids are singing.
We all freeze and die.
Everything's so gleeful though, and it's like you mentioned, like her eyes roll back into her.
And you imagine that for those kids, that's all they've known, so that is their normal. That's not weird to them at all. It's only weird to us because we don't exist in the Snowpiercer.
They're 2020. This is their coronavirus.
The engine. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
But yeah,
do you want to talk about some more of like the theories? Just to step away from the plot for a second.
Yes. Give me a reason.
Because you introduced me to this magical theory that kind of like it feels so right, but it's not something that you would come to right away when you see it. And it's not something that I thought of, but then when you sent me this video essay on it, I was like, yes. And so apparently the Reddits and the Twitter spheres are alive with the sound of
I mean, they're way ahead of me.
Take us through it.
So I had probably seen Snowpiercer at least half a dozen times before I happened across this theory, which is, if you're a fan of the movie, and you're probably familiar with this theory, but it surfaced in, I don't know, like maybe within a year of the movie debuting, some gentleman came up with a theory that this movie is a sequel to Willy Wonka, not the Johnny Depp, Tim Burton abomination, like our original Wilder Willy Wonka.
What happened to Tim Burton? That's a whole nother sidebar.
Series of videos called After Big Fish, Everything Went Down the Tubes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I honestly...
But the original Willy Wonka was, of course...
Helena Bonham Carter's fault, but the timing, it's a John and Yoko...
there you go.
I'm just putting it out there.
Lots of truth. But in this case, we are talking about the original Willy Wonka, and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is the full title. A film that we all grew up on, and even though it's, it's one of those films that kids just always saw on VHS throughout the decades, I feel like. Maybe that's kind of stopped now in the past couple decades, I'm sure. But when I was growing up, that was just a film that every kid saw. It was like almost mandatory. And they even showed it in school on a fun day or whatever. And it's just one of those films that, like, was just part of your childhood.
Yeah, I mean, the fact if children aren't being forced to watch it now, something is deeply wrong. Yes. But someone came up with this theory that Snowpiercer is a sequel to Willy Wonka, and that was, I will link it in the description. I can't remember that gentleman's name.
Right.
But
it sounds wild at first, but it's so insanely plausible that it's undeniable at this point.
It's undeniable. And if you haven't heard this theory, like, fasten your fucking seatbelts. But this gentleman on YouTube, I'll link it below, Rhino Stew, took this other gentleman's theory and like just went, like, he took us to church and he said, I'm going to give you a 15-minute synopsis and proof of why this is. So just to give you like a tight overview, the reason he's suggesting that this is a sequel to Willy Wonka is you have Wilford, this all-powerful gentleman at the front of the train that created this Noah's Ark, is basically Charlie from Willy Wonka grown up. So we know after having seen Willy Wonka that he inherits the chocolate factory from Mr. Wonka. And this is many years in the future. He's become a Elon Musk figure. He's become a titan of industry. And he's created this arc. And there are so many like similarities from
the big W on the train engine and the doors are so like harken back to the W on the Wonka, all the Wonka property, and the fact that Wonka's property is like an enclosed ecosystem of itself, that whole factory, and that he needed small people to run it, the Oompa Loompas, and on the train we need the small children to run it. And so, it's just, it goes on. And I guess Slugworth would have been, there's some people saying Slugworth was the John Hurt character.
Some people are saying, I've heard two things. I've heard people suggest that John Hurt's character is the equivalent of Slugworth, who at first appears in Willy Wonka to be a bad guy, but really is just a good guy trying to execute Wonka's vision to get Charlie to be his successor. Whereas in Snowpiercer, when you get to the end, you realize that Wilford and John Hurt's character, who is the wise elder of the tail sectioner, have actually been in cahoots the entire time.
But I have a question for you on that.
Yeah.
So when we learn that, we're taking it at face value from Wilford, who we shouldn't trust. So do you believe him about John Hurt's character? I mean, I guess we're never told not to, but
good question. So like
I just didn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the movie, Chris Evans' character Curtis gets to encounter Wilford, and Wilford reveals that all of the revolts that have happened, including the one he isn't just executed, but ones
We're
that have
staged.
or like the Revolt of the Seven, the history of the were all orchestrated between Wilford and John Hurt's character in order to control the population of this closed ecosystem. So
Right,
they would,
which must be true, but it's
it's
not like Bernie Sanders, that's for sure.
It's not like Bernie Sanders. Bernie would never do that to us. But the thing that sold it for me is much like the Wonka bars were hiding the golden ticket, the protein bars were always hiding the messages. So the protein bars would transfer little messages from the front of the train, i.e. Wilford, to the rear of the train that would go to John Hurt's character. And because of that, John Hurt would know, what is John Hurt's character's name in this movie? Gilliam. Gilliam would then have information to warrant a revolt. And the information, when it came to the tail sectioners, they didn't know it was coming from Wilford. They just thought there was like a 1%er that was like a spy and was like trying to help them.
Right.
But because we know that the train is a closed ecosystem and it gets repeated throughout the film, we know that this has to be the case. If bullets are extinct, because Wilford says in the end.
And you know what's really interesting is that the 1%ers on the train have a vested interest in keeping everything the way it is because it all serves them, just like in our society with 1%ers in real life. And then even though they must know that on the outside, things are slowly returning to habitable conditions, which we learn later in the film.
But not everybody knows that. Only like maybe
Right.
The 1%ers, the majority of the train doesn't know that.
No, not them, but I think Wilford must have that knowledge.
Him.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, well, he wants to keep everything the way it is. Definitely. Which is weird because if things are returning to habitable conditions outside, why doesn't he want to end his experiment or transition?
I think that's the ultimate question. Like, you have a white man in power. Do they ever want to give it up? Like, I think it's kind of, not to go down like that cliche road. Like, at this point, he's, and you're going to take it away from him. And the reason why I believe that Gilliam was in cahoots is because at the end,
couldn't he live just as good outside the train, almost like as a king in the New World? He would be like king of the whole world.
No, because if only, as is revealed in the movie, Nam and his daughter know that because they've been
seen some things, right?
And we know from a previous revolt that 7 people, the Revolt of the Seven, actually left the train, and every year we see these 7 people frozen in snow, and they've been tracking how the snow has receded. And one of those women was an Inuit woman who led that revolt, was the one who taught Nam, you can survive out here, here's how. So if only he and his daughter, to the audience's knowledge, know that there's the possibility of survival outside of the train, I don't think that Wilford would have entered like awareness, because he literally doesn't. He's a god, but he's also an isolated god, and I don't think that he.
Right.
I mean, the there, but I don't think.
Maybe it's getting ahead of us, but eventually it's revealed that there's life outside the train, which initially we think the conditions are so bad, everything is so frozen over, so cold that no life can exist. Certainly not like a polar bear or something, which we see later, and which we're led to believe that what's his name saw through a window, but then he doesn't go into it. He's like, I saw, oh, well, you wouldn't believe me anyway, or something like that.
all mythology. It's all
right.
somebody.
So if there are that many windows with the 1% can see out of, how have they not seen things as well on the outside? I'm sure a lot of them look outside.
I think it speaks to like the anesthetization of like comfort. If you're comfortable, like what reason do you have to like look out the window? Like,
right.
They
Plus,
also
it's
take
probably a newer occurrence. Yeah.
Right. And they take the fact that they have access to windows for granted, whereas the tail sectioners, every time they get an opportunity to look out a window, are paying fuck attention.
Yes.
I don't know. I think it just speaks to class in general, but there's when all is revealed in the third act, when Chris Evans and Ed Harris, Wilford meet, Wilford says, we don't have the luxury of true natural selection on this train. And
right.
He says, for balance of anxiety, and this is reality, right? This is politics. Proper balance of anxiety and fear, chaos and horror must be maintained, and if not, then we must invent it. And that is the purpose of the orchestrated revolt, is to population control. And population control wouldn't work unless you had a double agent in the tail section to like feed that propaganda into, like, to feed that false hope.
Sure.
That's how I read it. What else? So we know that, going back to like the Wonka theory, what's interesting, much like the chocolate factory, is like a kid dies or disappears in each like room of the factory. Like you lose
you lose people along the way.
Much like in this, with each time they enter a different car, you lose, well, many B characters, but a lot of A-listers too. Somebody has suggested in a video by Rhino Stew that the gun-toting assassin is the equivalent of the gun-toting kid in Willy Wonka, Mike, like the cow.
And that Tilda Swinton's character is like Veruca Salt.
That she's
is Veruca Salt.
Yeah, and that the yellow-clad lady that comes and steals the kids that you suggested might be a synthetic. Some people are suggesting that she's Augustus Gloop's daughter because she's heavy set, and there's a scene at some point where she tastes something and she goes like this and like savors it.
The blood, yeah.
Yeah, like sweets, like Augustus Gloop.
To me was a very android move too.
Oh yeah.
To be bleeding and then say, oh, I'm just gonna lick it off. It doesn't affect me at all. Like,
yeah, I think that's a new way to watch the movie now.
Yes, she's an android.
And we know we find out in the third act when Curtis gets to meet Wilford, and he explains his grand design again, which mirrors Wonka, the theory that everything was orchestrated from the beginning, including said revolts, such that Curtis, the reluctant leader, would succeed. Wilford wanted Curtis to be his successor because he knows he's not going to live forever.
Just like Charlie.
Just like Charlie and Willy. And so the two children that were kidnapped in the first act, we discover in the third act, were used to manually manipulate the engine of this train, which if they didn't, one would all freeze and die. And Wilford says, again, going back to the Wonka theory, that the parts went extinct that used this. So now they have to literally kidnap kids because they're small enough, i.e. Oompa Loompas, to fit into these small compartments and manually control the engine. So Wonka theory, Oompa Loompas went extinct. They're the parts that went extinct, and now they have to use little kids to keep the engine going. So there's that.
I don't know if it's that the Oompa Loompas went extinct or they just weren't brought on the train. And because the train is bound to, need serviceable parts eventually. So that was very realistic to me. You know how, because they can't manufacture everything on the train that they could outside
Right.
of the train. But
Bullets and cigarettes and
all those things.
I only have a couple more notes. We find out that the drug chronal that Nam and his daughter, who are huffing it the entire time, who are addicts of, we know that it's flammable, and ultimately that's what blows open the train in the third act and sets Yona and Timmy, Octavia Spencer's character's son, who was being used to manipulate the engine, free, and they will ultimately be like the potential future of humanity.
It's an ending where, because of the blast, the entire train goes off the tracks and is all mangled up, and probably tons of people die, and so it's not a happy ending, but then it kind of really is like a hopeful ending in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, you have the possibility, her knowing that it is possible to survive in the ice.
Right. When they walk out of their car section, wherever it has fallen, and they're okay, and there's fire everywhere and debris everywhere, and then they see a polar bear for the first time and realize if a polar bear, which is a warm-blooded animal, is surviving now out in the cold where no life could survive, that now it's returning to habitable conditions. And there's a shot earlier in the film where Nam's character, Nam, I think his name is, he is always eyeing a plane that's on the ground, and it was a plane that had crashed that was almost completely covered with snow, and every time that they circle the earth and see it again, he's noticing less snow on it. So he's looking for all those little cues to say, hey, the snow is melting a little bit more, the planet is warming up to habitable conditions. And when she sees that, when she has Octavia's child, and she sees that there's so much hope for humanity, because you feel like the ones that survived that wreck, which we don't know who did, but that they could then, start the process to living on Earth again as the human race.
Yeah, a male and a female. Yeah, it's
well,
so.
Yeah. Once he grows up, but yeah.
Have two components for procreation.
Sure, you do. Yeah.
I mean, the third act of this
Hopefully
movie.
Neither of them is barren.
Hopefully Timmy's didn't get married while he was shoved in the engine. Yeah, no, I mean, the whole third act to me is like, I thought like this, every time I'm like, every moment of this movie, I'm like, oh my God, this movie's so good. And then it gets better and it gets better. And so few movies do that, where like every moment of the movie just continues to like, not only satisfy, but like exceed.
Okay, but I'll challenge you. I think that Parasite is the superior film. Do you agree or no? We don't have to agree, but that's just my personal. There's similar statements on class. That's why
that's a loaded. Are you asking me which one I prefer or which one I objectively think is a better film?
I was thinking the objective, but I guess both. I know for preference you like Snowpiercer better as like a story, right?
Yes.
Which I can definitely see, but
honestly think.
I think that he, as an artist, had, after doing this film, I think he continues to like elevate himself. And I think that his talent has grown. And I think that he's learned a lot along the way. So I think his execution for Parasite is just so much more masterful. But definitely that's not to take anything away from this film. I just can see the growth, though, as an actual director.
Oh yeah, growth for sure, absolutely. But I think I still have to, if I were to be completely objective, I still think like Snowpiercer is a more masterful film, only because it's very hard to execute something. Parasite's set in reality.
Right.
Snowpiercer, and for somebody to execute something that takes place outside of reality in a fictional narrative and to execute it at such a level, that to me,
But
that's
he
my.
had the graphic novel to like lean on, right? Or no?
He did.
Whereas I think Parasite was an original screenplay, right?
I think so, yeah.
I'm looking. Snowpiercer was based on a graphic novel, and Parasite was an original screenplay by him and one other person. He co-wrote it and directed it. But maybe that's why I lean toward Parasite in that regard. And I think the cinematography is more masterful a little bit. I think it's a little bit more ambitious with the cinematography, especially given the real world scenario they're in.
I'll allow it.
Okay, but anyway. But
No,
yeah, I love this film, so
it's
I'll
just,
let you take us to church and take us home on this one.
yeah, I can't wait to dive into Parasite because I've seen it 3 times now and there's so much to unpack on it. And especially to see, to your point, like his trajectory, like from something like Okja, to Snowpiercer to this, and even going back before that to like to Host and Mother, like Parasite is clearly like set a new precedent for filmmaking and for storytelling. But it's
Sure.
I have a sweet spot. I'm biased for
Right. Well,
that.
everyone has their personal favorites. Like, yeah, definitely.
I have such a regard
This is just a really interesting subject matter too. I mean,
you like,
Snowpiercer.
yeah, it's, there's so much mythology, and like it's so easy to extrapolate something like the Willy Wonka theory from such rich source material. And I definitely want to make it a point to read the graphic novel. I mean, there's really only 2 other points I want to make about the movie. Like, just if I could go back to Chris Evans for a second and the dialogue, one of this movie is very dystopian and very dark, and there's, in the third act, you get so much. You get the resolve, you get Wilford, you get the master plan, you get, the hopeful potential future by leaving the train. But what you also get before all of that is like all of the pain that this Curtis character has been carrying, and
Right.
all of this history of him living and surviving on this train, which involves cannibalism. And the fact
that was harrowing, that moment.
and he's talking to Sam through the translator about how he was able to survive on the train. And then Wilford gives him the opportunity to basically become a new god. And there's a moment where Yona is like, hey, we have the explosives. We're about to blow this shit open. Give me your last match. And Chris Evans hesitates. And it's just this moment where he literally pushes her away, physically pushes her back. And you see him act with his face like he's negotiating, who am I in this moment? Like, am I going to be the new god, or am I going to like stay true to who I am? And it until Yona the clairvoyant reveals that the children are the ones hidden behind the engine keeping it running, that he wakes back up again and is like, I'm not going to tolerate this.
Right. He's really thrown for a loop at how his mentor was a betrayer this whole time. So, which was hard for me to accept watching it, honestly. But yeah, it's a shock.
When you posited, like, is that just Wilford spinning propaganda, or was Gilliam in on it? I don't have an answer to that. I think
ultimately you have to believe what the film is presenting you, because that's all we have to go on.
Yeah, but I think it's given the reality we live in out here in the real world, like, to me it's more believable that there would be a player on both sides pulling the
Sure.
string to keep
But
the
it was
match
so hard to believe it was him because he was so good.
perfect.
I mean, you really bought into that. Like this was the guy. Like,
but now you see Slugworth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, when Chris Evans delivers the monologue at the end and you see Chris Evans cry, talking about how they used to, like, be so hungry that they would kill each other and eat each other, and he delivers a line of dialogue beautifully when he says...
Do you think that gets, like, too intense at that moment when he's talking about, like... It just seems there's something odd about that moment. Like, when he freely admits to having been the one to say, let's eat this baby. Like, I don't think that he could have done that in real life. I don't know. It's just like, on the one hand, you're like there with him, you're relating to him, and then you're like, could I have done that? You put yourself in his shoes, and you think he's such a great guy, and then like he drops this bombshell at the 11th hour.
But the reason why I believe it, and I believe him as an actor in that moment, is because I think he delivers it beautifully as an actor, but also, like, I think about the movie Alive, which is based on true events of this rugby team that crashes in the Swiss Alps, and ultimately they have to engage in cannibalism. They're not murdering people that are already alive, obviously, but they do have to eat from the dead. And I don't think it's so far-fetched that people, I mean, you look at Holocaust documentaries, you look at things that have taken place and take place right now, unfortunately. I don't think it's that far-fetched that somebody would murder somebody and then...
Right. Well, and in the beginning the thing is, the reason it's such a bombshell for me is in the beginning of the film, you're not let in on the fact that things were that dire, because at the start of the film, as bad as it is to be in the back of the train because it's super the lower class, it's more livable, way more livable than it was for them. We just don't know that yet. So we're seeing it as bad, but it was like horrific before it improved, and we're not privy to that until he drops his bombshell in that speech.
I think why that tracks and works for me is because everything kind of aligns. When Wilford reveals to Curtis that he was in cahoots with Gilliam, and you realize Gilliam is a triple amputee, you know why now Gilliam is a triple amputee.
And you also
limbs to feed
definitely
fellow people. And then, to your point though, like, the movie starts off in people are in dire straits, but we don't realize how bad it was before until we get to the third act.
It doubles down on their plausible motivation to storm the front of the train, because they're never going to forget what they did to them. And as bad as it is when we first see them, it was so much worse. So when we learn that, it kind of confirms that, like, seething passion they have against the front of the train.
And it's also the elders, and Chris Evans is technically an elder because he remembers life before the train, whereas Edgar, which is the baby that he almost ate, but who becomes his best friend.
They drop a lot of bombs toward the end.
Essentially, yeah, but to me,
it's a minefield at the end of this film.
Yeah, there's a lot that you get that you didn't ask for, but you know, when you realize that Curtis, who's the hero of this movie, did really, really bad shit, to me, that makes a villain or a hero, that makes it more believable to me, because
they're human.
He has real motivation.
They're not perfect.
What is he says when he talks about how they used to eat the weak, he says, quote, "I know what people taste like, and what I hate about myself most is that I know that babies taste best."
Yeah.
I mean, like, to me, like, in the way Chris Evans delivers that,
such a hard line.
Like, I just...
Such a hard line to swallow, and I just feel like that far in the game, we're like invested in the actual action that's happening. So to like press pause and drink that in was like, it was a bitter pill for me when it happened a little bit because of how intense it is. So that's why I say that. But I welcome the backstory though. I think it just adds, it enriches everything. But I just think the timing of it for me was just a little bit tough. But that's a very mild criticism, though.
No, but it's a really acute one because it's a big ask of the audience to like go that far and then get like such a huge kind of like, oh, okay, now let's do the math. Like,
right.
With such an aggressively dark, like the darkest thing that humans can do outside of what like pedophilia, right, is like eat each other. You know, like it's the worst of the worst. It's hard, yeah.
Yeah.
But the only thing that was that I want to end on, and I was curious if you noticed this or like what your thoughts were, but when they do get to that moment where Curtis, Nam, and Yona blow the door open, and little Timmy, Curtis beat the shit out of Wilford, but he's still alive and he's sitting there, and he just kind of like resigns him. He's just like, I can't remember exactly what he says. I should have written it down, but like literally when the chronal explodes, like right before it, you just see Ed Harris as Wilford sitting there going, nice, or something like that. Like he just completely like resigns himself. And it was just so interesting. Like he didn't fight back. He just accepted that he didn't get a successor. His train is like, he just, it's over. And he just, resigned himself.
He gave up very unemotional. He was detached from his emotions. Yeah, a lot.
It was interesting.
Which seems to be like on character for him, like how he kind of operates. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to be divorced from emotion to do what he does, but
I think he's seen so much, and he's so like advanced in his life beyond just his years that that's why his character carries himself that way. There's a lot of realism to it for me. Yeah, definitely. He's really believable.
I love Ed Harris so much. I mean,
yeah, he was a nice treat, and it was nice for them to like hold him, you know, because it's like a reveal when you finally get to see him. So you needed an actor with the chops to like be worthy to wait for, you know.
Yeah, and to play such a ridiculous part, because ultimately everything in this movie is ridiculous.
Right, and he was saying in interviews that like he didn't care what the part was or anything. He just really wanted to work with Bong Joon Ho and just wanted the opportunity to work with this director, which I thought was insightful and cool.
What else? Like, if you needed any reason to watch Bong Joon Ho's body of work, there you have it. You have an endorsement by Daddy himself. Like, honestly. I mean, the
thumbs up. Fine family fun.
The cast that signed up for this movie in 2012, when it was probably in production, I mean, aside from Ed Harris, Tilda Swinton, Chris Evans, I mean, Octavia Spencer was still like relatively on the come up. Like The Help was probably out.
She looks young in this. I'm used to her look now, and she definitely looks like younger in this, which is interesting to see.
This cast is just epic. Like I've talked it to death. I think that it's really fun to go down the Willy Wonka rabbit hole, and I suggest that you do. I'll link the YouTube video below. But I'm so glad and grateful that this movie exists, because it brings me such joy, and so few movies, even ones that I really, really love, like give me, like, I feel like elated when I watch them. Like every time I watch this movie, and I've watched it a lot, it's like watching it for the first time every time. I'm just excited.
You
I
know
know.
what would be so fun would be to watch Willy Wonka and this back to back.
Yeah. Hell yeah. We could
That'd
do
be
that.
fun.
Yeah. I mean, the movie's just, it's trippy as fuck. It's psychedelic as fuck. It's just, I don't know. It scratches so many itches. It scratches itches I didn't even know I had until I saw it. You know what I mean? And now it has set a precedent for me when it comes to telling like fictional, whimsical, fantastical narratives. It's like, if you're not going to come correct, like don't come at all. You know, Bong Joon
Right.
Ho at a bar.
We're always saying we need more out of Hollywood, better writing in particular. And this is a case where we got it.
Yeah. So it's
good source material that was executed well.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I hope that I get an opportunity to read Le Transperceneige sometime in the near future. But yeah, do you have any last minute thoughts before we close it out?
No, other than just, glad I finally got to see it.
Yeah, and we will be doing Parasite, of course, and we'll probably do Mother. But yeah, I implore you to take 2 hours and 20 minutes out of your life and watch Snowpiercer. Comment down below on your theories, on your opinions.
And we have something else coming up too.
Uh-oh.
Color Out of Space.
Talk to them. Tell them.
So we're going to be doing Color Out of Space soon. Apart from our Bong Joon Ho series. As of this filming, we are going to be doing Color Out of Space. Spoiler alert. So I'm excited for all of these upcoming.
Yeah. And who's in Color Out of Space that we all love to
Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Rage.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about Mr. Cage in our Alien Resurrection video, and probably others and Aliens too. But yeah, I'm super excited to do Color Out of Space with you. And
can't wait.
Yeah, so thank you all for watching. As always, Chad's music library will be linked in the description box. Check it out. Please give us a subscribe if you're new. Notification bell. What else? Comments. Give it a thumbs up. I think that's everything I'm supposed to say. Like and subscribe.
Share with your friends.
Share with your friends. Yeah, go watch Snowpiercer, have a cocktail, and we will see you on the other side. Cheers.
See ya.